So the first couple days of my sophomore year of high school they're chaotic, right? There's hallways filled with like way too many young people at one place at one time, the slamming of lockers, the excited chatter to be returning to school. But amid all of that chaos and congestion, I saw him. He was tall, he had black hair that was pulled back into one of those tiny ponytails, and the bottom of his head was shaved. Remember, this was a very popular haircut in the 90s. I didn't like the haircut all that much because I always thought that tiny ponytail looked like a little turd sticking off the back of the guy's head, but I liked it on him. And he would wear these death metal t-shirts and combat boots, and I was smitten. Well, I quickly found out through the gossip channels that his name was Mychek. He was a freshman. He was an exchange student from Poland and, by all accounts, did not speak a lot of English yet. Well, of course, I thought, okay, he's new to town, he's new to this school, probably doesn't have a lot of friends yet, so I could very easily just walk up and extend my hand and smile and say, hello. But no, I didn't actually do that because that would have been too obvious and too simple and too easy. So instead, I turned to my friend Yolanda, who also happened to be a fluent Polish speaker. And of course, I know what you're thinking. It would make sense to use her as like a translator, right? Like have her be a go-between. So she could talk to Mychek for me, and I could introduce myself and get to know a little bit about him. Yeah, again, way too obvious and simple. No, instead, I asked Yolanda to teach me a few, polite Polish phrases that I could use to, get the conversation rolling. So she taught me things like jak się masz, which I'm sure I'm saying poorly, but is the one Polish phrase that I still remember. It's how are you? She taught me how to say other things in Polish, simple things like have a nice day, nice to meet you, happy Friday, hope you're well. So I started saying these things to Mychek, but not in a face-to-face, I'm standing in front of you, we're having an actual conversation way, no. Instead, I started yelling these things to him in the hallway because the face-to-face conversation, I was too chicken shit for that. So instead, there's me in the hallway as Mychek is walking out of the cafeteria, and I'm like, jak się masz, Mychek? And then there's Mychek headed towards the gymnasium, and I'm like, happy Friday, Mychek. And then, of course, I giggle and scamper off because I'm an idiot, and I'm apparently completely incapable of having any semblance of an adult conversation with a boy I think is cute. So it goes on like that for weeks, months even, me shouting at him. And I don't know what I actually thought was going to culminate out of these like super sad attempts at interaction. Like, did I think he was going to fall in love with me when I shouted, jak się masz? In poor Polish as he was coming out of chemistry class? Yeah, actually, I kind of did. I kind of thought that this was my cute love letter, my I like you, do you like me, circle yes or no, right? But Mychek, he never circled anything. I'm sure when I first started shouting at him in the hallways, it came as a shock. But over the months, he must have just let my voice fade into the background. And who can blame him, right? The fall came, the spring came, and then eventually summer came, and Mychek never responded once to my hallway shouts. And then it turned into the next year, my junior year, and then my senior year, and I don't remember seeing Mychek in the hallways once. I actually thought that at some point maybe he had returned to Poland to finish his studies, and that was that. My sophomore crush gone forever. And it wasn't actually until a couple years after I graduated that I ran into him again. I was at a backyard party, and I was with a group of friends, and we were chatting with some boys, and as I'm scanning their faces, I see Mychek. There he is. And after a few moments, he looks at me, and I see this, moment of recognition on his face. And he points, and he says, you. And I'm like, yes, it's me. And he's like, you made my first year here a living hell. And I was like, what? What do you mean? What are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, you and your friends, you used to shout at me in the hallways and you harassed me and it was awful. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's not at all what I intended. And I had a crush on you and oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. And in hindsight, I realized my approach sucked. But being a bully was exactly the opposite of what I had intended. And I hope that in that moment I was able to spit out some sort of apology, but honestly, I don't even remember. The conversation sort of ended right there, and my check walked away. And I remember a couple days later, I was talking to my friend Yolanda, this kind woman who spoke Polish, who gave me all these wonderful phrases. And I'm telling her this story, like I ran into my check again, and I'm so confused. And as I'm telling her this, she starts laughing. And as it turns out, while some of the phrases she taught me were accurate, like yak shamash being one of them, the others were bullshit. And while I thought I was saying things like, have a good day, nice to meet you, happy Friday, I was saying things like, touch my butt, what is that smell, and screw you. Well, I was mortified. To this moment, I am still mortified. And if I could go back, there'd be a million and one things I would do differently. I would march my ass to a library and get an English to Polish dictionary for starters. But more than that, I wish that those first couple days of my sophomore year, I just walked over to him, reached out my hand, smiled, and said hello. Thank you.